We made this.
Welcome back to another episode of Chucky Vision, but not another episode of Chucky, because that show is done for now. We've done all 7 movies, we've done all 8 episodes of the TV show, and now we're heading into uncharted Chucky territory. Uncharted for some, and we'll get to that. I am your host, Devin Elson, and with me as always, my co-host Mark Adams. How are you today?
I'm alright, how are you? It's nice to be back, and we're on a much more leisurely schedule at the moment. We're only doing one a month, and we're looking at oddities within the franchise, which I'm actually really quite excited about. I present another podcast on the We Made This network called Shipwrecks and Comatose, and that's about the British sitcom, science fiction sitcom, Red Dwarf. And we look at each episode one by one in 6 episode runs with each series. But in between times, we do what we call specials, and they are looking at weird shit like the Red Dwarf RPG game and, I don't know, Can't Smeg, Won't Smeg, which was the crossover that they had with Can't Cook, Won't Cook. Yes, that did happen. I'm actually really looking forward to doing this on a leisurely basis, looking at odd shit, because I like looking at odd shit, podcasting about stuff that literally no one else would ever consider podcasting about.
Absolutely. It is, yeah. Leisurely is a great benefit. And also, it's just not that Chucky wasn't fun. It's going to be very silly. It's going to be very, as you said, odd. Some of this stuff I've seen, some of this you've seen. Dolly Dearest has been mentioned. Puppet Master has been mentioned. We're not going to be on the same playing field there. Some of us have more knowledge about these. That ties into this first one. We're talking about the 2019 reboot of Child's Play, which I saw when it came out. You haven't seen this yet. Well, until now.
I watched it today for the first time. I initially thought that this was really fucking ill-advised, and I was quite anti it because I loved the Child's Play franchise, and I initially avoided it, and then I just kind of forgot about it. And it was only when we started our discussion about the original Child's Play, I was like, I actually do want to watch the remake now. And that's mainly because you said it wasn't absolutely diabolically shite.
Yes, there is a long history of horror reboots. It's sort of like video game adaptations. The best you can hope for is alright. The barometer for most is dog shit.
I quite liked the Rob Zombie Halloween films.
Oh no, I do. I love those 2 films.
Possibly because I like Rob Zombie, but also because they at least tried to do something different, rather than just basically rehash the thing with a slightly different story and a different director and all the soul sapped out of it, like the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. So in my head, it was going to be one of those 2 things. When we looked at the Child's Play remake, it was either going to be a soulless rehash or something that at least tried to do something different. And I'm going to give you a nice metaphor here. So yes, he's a massive abusive cunt. But if you look at something like an X Factor cover, which does very little difference to what the song it was covering, and you compare it to a Marilyn Manson cover, at least Marilyn Manson makes the song his own. Similarly, Hurt by Johnny Cash. I still love the 9 Inch Nails version, but Hurt by Johnny Cash is so different that they're almost 2 different songs. And that's what I look for in a cover version as well.
Cover version, that's a really interesting way of putting it. I definitely agree. I think some of the best remakes or reboots out there are the ones that really swing for the fences. Yeah, I do love the Rob Zombie ones because it really goes for its own style. I won't even say Rob Zombie style. It goes for a really interesting take on slashers. I almost went into it on an earlier episode, but I'm not going to talk too much about Halloween Kills. But that is a film that, that's a film that tries to have it cake and eat it. It tries to be very faithful and tries to be so nostalgic about the older Halloween films. But then when it's trying to do its own thing, that it's like tonal whiplash because it's trying to do too many things at the same time. That's why with, the holiday season, I kind of love all three Black Christmas films. Despite all sharing the same name, they're completely different films, all three of them. The 2006 Black Christmas is kind of a hot mess, but it's a fun hot mess. And in that sense, they're all just trying to do a unique thing. That's one of the main compliments I can give for this Child's Play film. For the most part, feels like an original script that they slapped the Child's Play name on.
Okay, that is also my initial assessment as well. I did have a little looky look at how well it had done on Rotten Tomatoes, like we did for the first 7 films that we looked at, and it got 64%. That means that Child's Play, Curse of Chucky, and Cult of Chucky got stronger Rotten Tomato reviews than the remake of Child's Play. And that also means that Child's Play 2, Child's Play 3, the best film, Bride of Chucky, and the forgotten classic, Seed, didn't get as good a reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. Do you agree with the placement in comparison to the others?
There are flaws and there are nitpicks about this film. What it goes out to do is an enjoyable roller coaster of entertainment. It's very similar in some ways to the original.
Yeah.
It works in its simplicity. There's very little characterization. The pacing is really tight because you really don't mess around with any of the subplots and stuff. I guess that works for and against it. So, I mean, I would probably place it a little higher. I would give it like a 70%, maybe a little bit more than that. The big criticism, of course, is how different it is from the mainline Chucky films.
Yeah.
It's odd that it is, as you put it, like in the middle with a lot of the films. It's not obvious all the other films rate higher than this one.
Well, I deeply disagreed with quite a lot of the Rotten Tomatoes stuff for the other films. Like Bride of Chucky was disgracefully rated. I'm like, what the actual fuck? This one, I think, like yourself, it's not much lower than I would have given it. I'd also go around 70-ish. It's a perfectly watchable, fun slasher. But what it does have, which I found fascinating, is it's got quite eerie levels of similarity in its statistics to the actual first Child's Play film. It's a 15, which the first Child's Play film was. 90 minutes, which we've talked about the brevity of the Child's Play films. They were all around that. It had a 10 million budget and made 45 million at the box office, compared to the first Child's Play film having a 9 million budget, making 44 million at the box office. I think all of those are little weird-ass coincidences.
Yeah, in the comparisons with the other films, I guess the strangest contrast is what they were going for is going back to a lack of continuity. Like, just to wipe the slate clean and just, this is its own story. It's interesting because Bride and Seed and stuff is that continuity, devotion to the fans and stuff. Does that really pay off? For the films, Rotten Tomatoes wise and, you know, critically and financially and stuff, maybe it doesn't so much pay off, but it has finally paid off with the TV show.
Yes, I'd agree with that completely.
The TV show really did well in old stuff and new stuff. And
yeah, I'd agree with that.
After the show, watching this after the show, it is interesting to see. It's odd because I guess my argument, I'm taking like a producer standpoint, like what works and what doesn't work, and it's at this point now, it's an oddity, isn't it?
It's definitely an oddity. It's also, I'm surprised that it was a hit because that wasn't the impression I got. I don't know where I got it from, but I didn't think it was going to score as highly on Rotten Tomatoes, and I didn't think it would make more than 3 times its budget, therefore being a box office hit. So I was genuinely surprised by that. I don't think it's as good as Child's Play. I don't think it's as good as Bride of Chucky. I don't think it's as good as Curse or Cult of Chucky. We all know my weird affection for Child's Play 3. I don't know. I'm surprised that it did this well. I think it kind of deserves it. It is a fun horror film. It is.
For all the comparisons to the franchise and where it stands and how it all connects or does not connect, on its own, it's a decent film.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that because you did briefly say that it didn't have to be a Child's Play remake, and I would agree with that. I think Child's Play is quintessentially a man in a doll, and it is a specific man. I really do feel like that. So without Charles Lee Ray, with a weirdly and strangely sympathetic character. It is maybe a little bit too different to deserve the name Child's Play.
Since this film was a couple of years ago now, and that's also an odd thing. I tend to think of this film as like 2017 or something. I forget how recent it is.
Well, it's pre-Plague, but not by much, by the sounds of things.
Yeah, only a couple of years. I would like to see where this timeline could go, where this world could go. It's simple, but like you said about how Chucky is oddly sympathetic in this movie, it has ideas that start to go in interesting directions.
It's odd that it didn't get a sequel, considering it did so well. And the director does seem to be interested in doing a sequel. I feel like the success of the teleseries does mean that the sequel is unlikely. Even Star Trek, when it had the new films, those new films have stopped now that they've gone back to the original world with the successful animated stuff and Discovery. But the film franchise has died because the teleseries are doing so well. And I wonder whether that was the death knell for a continuation of the remake Child's Play universe. Is that what we're calling it?
It could have definitely had a sequel, yeah. We're not skipping to the ending here, but it's the most obvious of teasers that Chucky might come back. So,
yeah.
Like, I don't know how safe they would have played it. I would have hoped maybe they would have gone wild with some of the ideas. I mean, that's the only reason I'm interested in it so much. It's very odd that, I guess, in some producers' meeting or something, they have to choose between the two timelines. Like, seemingly only one can exist at the same time. It's such a bizarre move. I guess that your Star Trek comparison is really the best one to make. Like, how often does a reboot happen and then the original creator's like, you know what, I'm just going to power on through. I'm just going to keep making my movies.
It probably does happen more, but I'm literally drawing a blank for anything other than Star Trek and Chucky.
Well, that was one of the main things that we praised about the Child's Play franchise, was that so many of the other horror franchises are broken apart by different directors, different writers and stuff, and they don't feel like one cohesive narrative.
Yeah, and we talked about Halloween briefly earlier. They've gone back and forth.
Yeah, they kind of did the same thing, but even then, it's like, it's not really John Carpenter's Halloween is back. It's it's David Gordon Green's Halloween, so even that feels like a new strand.
Yeah, and I love how Halloween was never supposed to be just Michael Myers. Halloween 3 would make it an anthology type situation, a bit like the Friday the 13th teleseries we've talked about in the past, and the Nightmare on Elm Street teleseries. They don't have Jason Voorhees or Freddy in them, really. Freddy's a narrator like Elvira, but that's it. I just find the whole thing weird. And going back to what I said before, this doesn't deserve the Child's Play name. If it hadn't been called Child's Play, would we have got a sequel?
It could have got a sequel. I think, as you said, it did well as a film in the box office and everything. So I think we've done enough pontificating on franchises. I mean, franchises are I think that's what interests horror fans so much. These franchises. No franchises. Child's Play is sort of an anomaly because it's the most clear-cut franchise, but...
Spoilers. I mean, reality is, if you listen to this podcast by now, you know we've watched it and we're going to talk about it, so spoilers. He wanted to actually continue the franchise with the teddy bear Chuckies.
Okay. See, that's what I mean. That's what I suggested, take it in a weird direction. Take it somewhere different. But then you've still got the sort of the chain around it. The name, Child's Play.
Yeah, didn't need to be called Child's Play.
Let's get right into it then. So, I mean, this film really doesn't mess around much. We do get straight into it, don't we? The creation of Chucky. Oh, well, we do get a little prologue of sorts with the Kaslan director.
Yeah, that felt very modern from the very beginning. But what I did like was that it took mere seconds to establish, this is why Chucky's in this world, let's move on and get to the action. And if that isn't a parallel to Child's Play 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7, I don't know what is.
Yeah, he explains that Kaslan is sort of like Apple or Google or all these companies these days. Everything is connected in the cloud. We're releasing this new doll, Buddy doll, which is going to connect to everything as well. And obviously, that's going to lead to some bad things. Did you notice we talked about this, I think, way back in the very first episode of Chucky Vision? We talked about how the original Chucky, the Playpal dolls, were based on the My Buddy dolls.
Right, yes, they were. And now they're called Buddies.
Yeah, they're playing a little closer to it, because I don't think Buddy dolls are a thing now, so I guess they can mess around with that name now.
Yeah.
But yeah, we get straight to the creation of our new Chucky. Yeah, it's very, aside from there being lightning in the scene, noticeably different from the creation of Charles Lee Ray's Chucky.
Oh, absolutely. But like I say, so bloody quick, and it makes sense, and it just lets you get on with the action and the storyline rather than getting caught up in the origin. And when you think about it, it is quite grim without you even noticing it. Made in Vietnam, because it's cheaper. And obviously you will lose the American scenes in the factory, like we had with Andy in Child's Play 2. But the toy store works perfectly well. So they made it more modern immediately with two things, tech and the reality that nothing gets built in the fucking States anymore.
I forget how satirical this film starts. What did you think of this new origin?
It just felt like evil Alexa, and everyone's been a bit worried about Alexa watching them. You hear how she listens. She's probably listening to me now. I haven't switched her off, and I did say her name. And there are people like me who are like, well, that ship sailed. And there are people that are probably more intelligent than me and legitimately concerned about it that wouldn't have an Alexa. It isn't really a killer doll film. I feel like it is an evil Alexa on legs film.
They could have even gone with the angle that this disgruntled employee, like his soul or his evil, could have passed on to her. But no, this is purely tech-based and quite a simple twist to turn a doll evil. You just turn off its violence inhibitors.
Yeah, it's oversimplified. It is. I do feel like it immediately makes it significantly sci-fi rather than horror. You obviously get a lot of crossover, so Alien is a perfect example. That is clearly both sci-fi and horror. Whereas the original Child's Play film and all the subsequent stories up to and including the teleseries, there is no real sci-fi there. They haven't got lasers. We haven't gone to space in 100 years, like in a million years away or whatever it is like in Jason X. There hasn't really been any hard level sci-fi. It's all been voodoo. And voodoo is completely wiped in favour of evil Alexa. It's very, very modern and on the nose and cynical. And definitely, I would say this is more of a sci-fi than it is a horror.
Yeah, and we definitely get into later in this film. It's not even so much it is the plot, but it's the story, I guess, of is Chucky evil if he is just programmed this way?
Well, Chucky is what happens when you give a child an adult body and they don't have any guidance, which we've seen in lots and lots of other stuff before. I think they do it well here.
It's one of the things that I kind of come to a couple times in some of the plot points in this. It is simple to a point where it's almost too brisk, and it's like we could spend a little time developing this. I mean, it's it's entertainment. It's a horror film, so I don't mind that it moves at a brisk pace. I don't mind that it has to so explicitly say violence inhibitors.
So I just feel like the themes, is this a life? Can a artificial intelligence be a life? For those of us that have faith, I don't, but can a artificial intelligence have a soul? That is a theme of this film. There's also technology going wrong. That is another theme of this film. Hugely sci-fi kind of themes. Horror tends to be about family or punishment for bad things, which we do have some punishment for bad things in this, but you understand what I'm getting at. The themes feel so very sci-fi.
Yeah, I think that's why we were so hung up on the idea of a sequel. But the first Child's Play, it really uses it just as a story mechanic. He uses voodoo to get into a doll, and then he wants to get into a person again. It's very simple. And Mancini in the sequels has explored the themes that go along with that. This film, I would say this film introduces themes, but it doesn't necessarily explore them too deeply.
Yeah, I think if I was going to be critical of this film, other science fiction has done a much better exploration of the themes that they set up but don't really do much with.
Yeah, there are points in this where, like you said, you do feel a little sorry for Chucky. You don't quite know what Chucky's thinking. It's one of those things where they explain a major theme in just like one line of dialogue. Like, oh, so that's what Chucky is, what this AI is thinking. And it's never really they've summed it up in the most efficient way possible. Which I guess is the best way to say the pacing in this is it's efficient. So you don't get to really explore anything, but it's not rushed. It's efficient pacing.
Brevity. It has brevity.
Which we complimented in the original Child's Play. It really doesn't take breathers like exploring characters and stuff. It just gets on with the plot really fast.
But I complimented it because that's what I want in horror. I don't necessarily want that in sci-fi.
Okay, yeah. Now I get you. I get the distinction now. Yeah, it does open up a lot of windows that it doesn't explore. I mean, even if this disgruntled employee didn't do this, I feel like as soon as this hit the market, hackers will open and explore anything. Like day one, they're going to find something that says violence inhibitor, and they're going to go, "Hey, Kazlan, what does this mean? What if this got turned off?"
Yeah, it is significantly less sophisticated than the modern sci-fi I would expect. Something made in the 50s or 60s, yes, but this isn't sophisticated enough for a sci-fi fan, I don't feel.
It doesn't, like, explore the idea of what if this naturally happened, like, if things went wrong. Very clearly just, Chucky is one of a kind, it seems, in this story.
I think what it also does is because it was so simple to remove the violence inhibitor, it already puts in the back of your mind that the next film, if there were to be a sequel, there could be multiple Chuckies, which again is a parallel to the first one. From Child's Play 3, they were considering having multiple Chuckies. Obviously, they didn't get to it until Cult of Chucky, but this is more explicit that multiple Chuckies are likely, actually, because of the simplicity of making a Chucky have potential for evil and violence.
Yeah, and more likely that it wouldn't even be Chucky. It doesn't need to pass on from one doll to the next. Like, as we said, like, this is a computer era. This could happen in any doll.
Exactly that.
Yeah, we'll get back to Chucky in some time. We've got, just like any Child's Play film, we do also have humans in this story. And we get pretty much the same cast as we do, just with new faces. So we've got Karen and Andy.
Yeah.
What do you think about the same but updated versions of these characters? Because they're a little, what's the word? Marvel humor? They're a little...
Okay, so I have less sympathy for Karen, and I really like the change to Andy's character. Essentially, Karen is a blackmailer and a thief. That is the first thing you see her doing, is blackmail so that she can steal something. And that does feel significantly less sympathetic than the woman that desperately saved the money to provide her kid with the toy that he wanted. However, clued up modern Andy works for me. You couldn't have the boy be as naive as Andy was in the 80s without it seeming a bit unauthentic for a modern film. And I like that he's slightly older. I like that at 12 he's trying to be cool. He's trying to find his place in the world, and I like that they're trying something different by losing the 8-year-old childhood innocence that Andy had. I like that, and again, it does feel like a good modernisation. I don't like that his mom starts by being a bit of a bellend.
Yeah, well, he was a philanderer, if that's the right word I'm using. He was cheating on his missus.
He was, but blackmail still isn't nice.
I think it was just a deliberate update from, as you said, from both characters, from pretty much every character. It's a very deliberate update from the desperately sincere tone of the first film. I think you called them white meat baby faces in the first film, and that is true.
I probably did. Yeah.
There's not a bad bone in their bodies. They are just good people in the first film. Yeah, for the most part, they're good people here.
Yeah. I just didn't feel like it was the right way to start it.
It goes a bit, I wouldn't even say edgy is the right term, but it tries to be a little edgier. You know, like one of the first lines this Andy gets is saying, "You look like shit" to your own mom.
Yeah, that was... Yeah, you're right.
There's a bit more in lines, there's a lot of lines like that where there's more actual, like, jokes in this film than there are on the first one.
Yeah, that's probably true. And I think it does reflect the different dynamic between kids and their parents now. In the 80s, that would have been a disgrace, whereas you will never be able to shield your 12-year-old from words like shit like you could in the 80s. The internet is a thing.
Yeah, it's all been updated pretty well, and I understand that those lines are in there mainly just because doing this as a straight horror would probably be an awkward move.
Mm.
I don't know. Even as serious as the first Child's Play is, I don't know. There's an element of people have come to expect comedy from Chucky.
Yeah.
So if you completely got rid of that in a reboot, people would be like, why is this so serious? About a killer doll, especially.
True.
Yeah, we get another character returning. We've talked about this character returning a lot in the original timeline, but we get Detective Mike again.
Yeah, Detective Mike, played by the guy who's Phostos in Eternals. The cast is actually pretty strong in this.
This film really has a good cast, yeah. I really like Aubrey Plaza in this role. She delivers a really different feel of Karen. Brian Tyree Henry in this is I wouldn't even say it's really the same role. It's just a different character from the original Mike.
Yeah, I think it is just a character name. They've got a name and a job, and they've completely rewritten it. And I like that. I do think that's good. It's a more modern idea, and I like that his mum is around. And yeah, I do like Mike. I think that there's something again, it's a nice modern upgrade to the situation of Child's Play.
Yeah, I mean, I said about thin characterizations, but I mean, if you look at the original film, Mike Norris in that is just, I shot Charles, and I'm a cop, and I don't believe Karen. And then he just comes in at the end, because I guess Karen couldn't fend for herself.
Yeah, and this Mike is much more fleshed out.
He is,
right.
yeah, before he even joins the plot, he feels like just a character that's there. You know, he lives there, he sort of makes friends with Andy. You know, he feels like a character before he joins the plot. And he gets an interesting dynamic later in the story.
Yeah, what I will say at this point is when you're not sure if he's going to be a major character or just someone that walks by and says fucking millennials, I take umbrage at the idea of fucking millennials. The guy who plays him looks about 40. That makes him millennial. Or Zennial, which is on the edge of Generation X and Millennial. You're millennial because you're in your late 20s. And that boy is well into the next generation.
Yeah, I guess this came just before people started replacing the millennial insult with Zoomer.
It really does bother me that people are this ignorant. So I get called a boomer, and I'm hardly a Generation Xer. And I really take umbrage in it that people are that ignorant. Obviously, I can't and won't compare it to the ignorance of not knowing a racist or an ableist term when you use it. But it is fucking ignorance. And it really annoys me that people don't seem to know what damn generation they're in. Rant over. I wonder if it was deliberate. I wonder if it was a comment on the fact that people get their generations wrong.
I think just when this came out, millennial was just a generic insult. It's
Maybe.
not real. If this film was made just more recent, people would probably be saying, like, Zoomer's the new insult. For kids these days, everyone says Zoomer.
I presume that means Generation Z or Generation Z.
Yeah, I assume that's what he was referring to. But millennial in that, just a few years ago, millennial was just such a vague insult for young people.
But yeah, other than that, I thought that Mike was brilliant.
Yeah, I think his jokes land the most natural out of everyone's. That bit where Andy asks if he can come for dinner, and he just says no, closes the door.
Yeah,
that always gets a laugh from me.
In a world where ACAB is a big deal at the moment, again, this was before ACAB was a thing, a sympathetic, likeable police officer, I think is quite important, more so now than when this film was made. I didn't find the original Mike particularly likeable, whereas this Mike really liked him.
It really only comes into play like in the second half of the story. The first half, it's really not a factor that he is a policeman. Whereas in the first film, I don't think he even needed a name, really. You could just call him Detective. That was his role in the first film.
I do feel like that's a fair cop. See what I did there? It's a pun! It's a pun, Dev! Couldn't resist. And I'm not sorry.
You reminded me though when we in the little millennial talk about the kids and stuff in this. That's an interesting divergence from the first film, isn't it? Andy has friends in this.
Yeah, he does.
They, like Mike, these are new characters and they play a part in the story, and that's for as much as they ignored this film and carried on in the original timeline. It does feel similar to the new Chucky show, doesn't it?
It does, but I'd also argue that it could be that they are fulfilling the Kyle role from the second film.
Yeah.
They are slightly older.
Yeah, that is interesting, yeah. And it does make you wonder, makes you wonder how good a job they did in the original Child's Play, that Andy didn't have anyone to react to, or, react with. It really was just him and Karen. I imagine writing a film like this, you kind of need other characters for Andy to hang around with.
Yeah.
They're also really good. It's a good cast all the way around.
I particularly liked Omar, how he started off as a bad kid and very rapidly changed because of encountering Chucky. Other films in the franchise took quite a while for people to come around, and the ambiguity of having Omar as a baddie, but not for very long. Yeah, I liked that. Because I wasn't expecting him to join in the fight with the other three. And when he did, I really felt like it made sense, because he'd been wronged by Chucky as well. More so, actually, when you think about it, than his two mates who I've also forgotten the names of.
Okay, that is interesting. Because I was going to say, there's even though this film is a brisk 90 minutes, I feel like you could just cut Omar from the film. I don't know really how much he adds. Because I find that's the only bit and it's just a small part of the film, but when he gets Chucky and Chucky is trying to make Andy jealous, that's one of the only story beats where I'm like, where is this going? This is a weird tangent. It moves at such a brisk pace that it doesn't necessarily matter.
I'd argue that you need to see that Andy has moved on already from Chucky, and he doesn't get jealous, and that frustrates Chucky, which escalates the situation. So I don't think it's an unnecessary subplot, actually.
I guess. But I just find it you seem to enjoy it, but him being in the finale, I was just like, okay, there he is. You could have him there or not.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know. I guess I like the redemption of Omar to some extent, I think. It felt kind of normal, because everyone gets angry and does bad shit, and then when they realise they've done wrong, they try to make amends. And that's Omar's arc.
I don't know, but I'm comparing it to a TV show. It's not exactly like the storylines in the Chucky show.
No.
It's a weird mix between, again, it's what we talked about, the sci-fi stuff. There's stuff there, I just don't think because of the pacing, it explores that stuff so much. It's just sort of there.
Fair enough. We haven't really actually talked about Chucky.
No, I was going to say, we're talking about how good the cast is. What did you think? The hardest person to replace in a Chucky film is Brad Dourif. How did you feel about Mark Hamill?
So, for me, when I discovered that Chucky wasn't going to be played by Brad Dourif, I was like, well, it's not going to be fucking Chucky. Oh, they cast Mark Hamill. So I think if it had been an unknown or someone that I didn't rate as a voice actor, I'd have been very, very concerned about how good a job they could do. I was impressed by the casting of Mark Hamill, and apparently he was the first choice. They approached him, he said he'd like to do it, they gave him the part. He didn't audition or anything. He was their absolute favourite choice from day one. And I think Mark Hamill, predictably, did an excellent job.
He did. I think that was definitely a big get for them, especially since those last years then. It wasn't like he was an older actor that maybe wasn't as big. He was in the new Star Wars films. Those were coming out. He was on TV, The Flash, and TV shows like that. So people,
True.
He was a name. People knew who Mark Hamill was. And so that was definitely a big get for this film. And he, while it is in the same circles as his Joker, it's unique. And it's definitely, it's what we've been saying, what was a strength of this film, that it's very different from Dourif's Chucky.
Definitely. You gotta remember, he's not playing Charles Lee Ray. He's playing an innocent, to some extent. An innocent who's had his head fucked with by the Vietnamese guy. Vietnamese guy who doesn't get any comeuppance, by the way. I've only just thought that. He's only in it for seconds, and then you don't hear of him again. He caused all this. Oh, he kills himself, doesn't he?
Yeah, that is a plot point that is very quickly brushed over. You do not go back to that satirical Made in Vietnam angle, which is kind of an odd point when you watch it again.
I think to some extent, obviously, I've only watched this once, and the fact that I forgot that
Yeah.
means that it was so fucking rushed that, yeah, I forgot that he dies. Shit, he does die.
It has that sort of Black Friday consumerism angle at the end, but it never ties a bow on the start of the film.
No, so he does get his comeuppance, but still.
You're talking about Chucky being innocent.
But still, the point is that he is an innocent. And I like the progress of how he becomes more and more fucked up by his experiences, but without the teaching and adultness that we have as we get older. He can't rein in these compulsions that someone pisses you off, you want to hurt them. And you know damn well that's a terrible, terrible thing to do, and only bad people do it. But it doesn't stop the desire, whereas because he is so incredibly naive and young in a lot of ways, I think that they do that really well. And the doll's face is really fucking creepy.
He does do a tremendous job in this because it is, yeah, he is both very sinister in the role, but then also, as you say, very innocent, even towards the end.
It's a really nice balance, actually.
Yeah, it's definitely, he is absolutely on the same page with the writing of this new Chucky. It's not even his perspective on matters. It's just that he is an AI. He's just sort of running through a list of executables and programs and just trying to figure out how to interact with people. He's just going down the wrong route. But he doesn't know any better.
Yeah, and what I also like about the actual doll is that in the original, it is a doll that comes alive. In this, it is an animatronic doll that comes alive. So they needed animatronics in the first film to create him being alive. But in this one, I feel like just a little subtle weet noises every time that his face moves. And the way it moves as well, that emphasizes that it's animatronic more, rather than trying to suggest that it's not real, but you know what I'm getting at. It's explicitly animatronic. And that's really nicely done. And it feels more creepy because of it and the context of the film.
We talk a lot about the animatronics of the other Chucky, and you're definitely right. Yeah, this one, and they play around with it a lot in this. You know, they never really explore what's going on inside Chucky, the other Chucky. It's just sort of blood and stuff for the most part. Whereas in this one, they do explore that and taking him apart and upgrading him and his connection with the rest of the world and stuff. That definitely plays a part throughout this film. Karen got that for free, and there's no way that this is going for less than this has got to be $600, $700 for this kind of technology. This has got to be expensive. I mean, I understand, it works well in the satirical angle, but I mean, practically, it's so odd that this thing can just walk around and just talk autonomously. Even if this was a good doll, it's weird just that can walk around and just turn on your TV and just start watching TV.
True. So the thing with the finger, though, I get what they were trying to do, but all I could think of was E.T.
I think it is an E.T. reference. It's definitely an odd E.T. reference.
But it seems really weird. The eyes were already a good thing, and I don't know why they needed the finger as well.
It's an odd design choice. I mean, you gotta just think, keep it simple. It's just a doll that says dick cheese, if you ask it to.
Wow. I don't think the others say dick cheese.
I don't think the others are allowed to say... it's not swearing. Are the others allowed to say this is for Tupac?
Probably not. It's not just Chucky that is almost believable, but we're not quite there tech. The auto car freaked me out as much as Chucky did. I want to be driving my own car or have someone I trust in control of the car. The auto car really freaked me out.
Probably thank God this film doesn't try to slow down and explain things, because you can't really over-explain that. You can't start trying to explain why that's safe. It's an auto-driving car. We understand the concept.
There aren't that many kills. There's Shane, and then there's Gabe, and then there's the old lady who I didn't write her name down, Mike's mum. The first two are, without a shadow of a doubt, bad people who do bad things. The doll sees that, and he reacts to that. But as he gets used to being able to do these things, his jealousy kicks in, and he kills the old lady who really didn't fucking deserve it. And I like that. It shows almost like a progression of deterioration of morality, and I think that's done really nicely.
It is interesting that, because again, it shows that, the first kill in Child's Play is the Maggie, the babysitter, and that's very much, a victim, an innocent victim, and that goes to show how evil Chucky is. And it's interesting that it takes, I'm just spitballing, but it takes like a good hour of the film until it gets to Mrs. Norris. Like, the first two, it's odd that the first two kills are these very established creeps.
Yeah.
So it almost sets you into this expectation that this Chucky is like some kind of like Dexter vigilante.
Yeah. And then it changes. But the first two deaths are awesome. They are awesome deaths. Fucking a horrible lawnmower face removal and your balls getting cut up by a circular saw. Those are proper horror film deaths.
Absolutely, yeah. As far as horror deaths go, I think Charles Lee Ray would be proud of these, because they are very gory and also very just imaginative. That first lawnmower one, the Christmas lights, and then Shane breaking both of his legs.
Oh, that was grim, that.
Yeah, him trying to stop the lawnmower. It's not even that, like, just his, like, head gets destroyed. It's like he gets scalped, and then his face is, like, ripped off.
It's pretty creative as horror deaths go, and I do like an elaborate, creative death.
Yeah, did you think the film was going to be this gory? Because, some of these kills are very gory.
I wasn't expecting them to be that gory because it was 15 rated, and then it really early established that it's more sci-fi than horror. And then, fucking hell, Shane's death was... wow. Wow. So no, absolutely not. I wasn't expecting that. Like Seed of Chucky, I was surprised that this got a 15 rating. What do you need to do to get an 18 these days?
I don't know. I mean, apparently, they got away with putting Shane's face on a watermelon.
Exactly.
That whole series of events, that sequence, is the craziest, like, sort of a tangent, but it's a very purposeful tangent. But, like, who would have expected that? Like, not only the face being on the watermelon, but then the whole tension of them trying to hide it, and then it inadvertently ending up becoming a present. This film, like we said, like, it has horror elements, and then it had characters making little quips and jokes and stuff, and that was the comedy. Probably the highlight of the film when it really merged comedy and horror together.
That was done really, really well, because Andy is 12. He is likely to be inept at hiding the body of a murder victim. Of course he is. He's fucking 12. So yes, I thought they did really, really well there.
Yeah, and just thought, that whole tension of him inadvertently having to give it as a present to Mrs. Norris and then needing to get it out of her house.
Brilliant. I feel like the change of focus of why Chucky is torturing Andy is really good too. The original was like, voodoo, 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 I want your body. I could have phrased that better, but This one felt much more of like a stalker thriller. A bit more bunny boiler. Whereas Charles Lee Ray, it's almost like a practical reason. Whereas this Chucky, it's obsession.
It's like single white doll.
Yeah, exactly that. The changes they made was like a good cover version. They made sense.
We talked about Chucky's sympathy and Chucky's story here. When it gets to like this midpoint, it's really interesting. And it's so odd, like, you get that shot of him in the dark, sitting on his bed. He's just been grounded.
Like a naughty dog.
It's very oddly affecting. He saw the kids watching a horror movie, and he just reenacted it, because he thought it would make them laugh.
Yeah, and it's an innocence that obviously Charles Lee Ray never had.
And it does do a good job. It sort of ties into themes and ideas in the Chucky show of where Chucky very deliberately tries to corrupt people like Jake. Some of the tension in that storytelling comes from, is Jake going to do something bad? But also, do people think that Jake was capable of murder? And that happens in the very first Child's Play. People like Mike suspect Andy, this little boy, is capable of murder. It does a decent job in this one, because in the first one, it's like, who's going to suspect Andy, really? He is the nicest boy that ever lived.
And that's why this Andy is 12. A 12-year-old is much more likely and capable of the crimes that we've seen here.
Yeah, because it's like Jake's bullying. Shane is an asshole to Andy, and Andy he has this pent up frustration and this anger, and he screams in his room, and Chucky just picks up on that. Chucky just absorbs that,
and you can see where Karen's coming from better here. His circumstantial behaviour, like smashing the telly with no explanation, does suggest that he is clearly mentally unwell, which I don't think they did as well in the original Child's Play.
This gives Mike a really interesting story point. And it's a shame that once it reaches that point, it kind of just ends, because then the finale starts. But I really found it more interesting where Mike suspected Andy in this, because it was, as we were saying, it's more believable that Andy was doing this. And especially when he connects the dots and finds that Andy did, unintentionally, but he did bring a severed face into his house. I think anyone would be reasonably pissed at this 14-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And it's very affecting as well when he does find his mother dead.
Oh yeah, the actor's brilliant.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Real grief.
It's a shame, really, how good that scene is. That we're gearing up to the finale here. Once he gets to Andy in the finale, that storyline just sort of ends. And again, that's sort of probably one of the nitpicks in terms of like the pacing in this film. I mean, I don't know how they could have explored it, but like that was where it was written almost too well. And then they were like, "Oh, we're just going to end it here because it's the end of the film."
Yeah, I don't believe that on the same day that your mother died, you would do anything other than go home and cry rather than arrest a kid. Yes, that is a plot fault. I agree.
We already talked about the Omar subplot, which is around the third act, isn't it?
Yeah.
And after that, I mean, Chucky being called Chode.
Yeah, that was quite... Yeah, it showed the difference between Andy and Omar, didn't it? That he gave him a funny lol penis joke name.
But there is some interesting conflict with that bit in the store again when they get into an actual fight because of Chucky. That was it. That was pretty decent.
Yeah, and also the tech failing consistently. I was like sitting there going, I know how that feels. That was a nice touch that even in the future, maybe the relatively near future, where Alexa's got legs, it still has that issue that it's a bit janky connecting to your phone and Wi-Fi and all that shite. I liked that because that was lived experience for me.
I don't know that one.
Why did that?
I'm going to switch my Alexa off.
Why did that pick up so delayed then? What was that even in relation to?
Oh, I don't know. She's a weirdo.
Oh, maybe you almost gave her the idea to get legs then.
Shit.
But then we move pretty briskly into the finale here. All characters are coming together. I like the two friends. They unfriended Andy, as kids are to do in that sort of age. Someone acts like a bellend and you just disown them.
Yeah.
It made sense that they knew how dangerous Chucky was. So the moment that it's suspicious, they're just immediately into like they feel like detectives themselves for a moment. They're just like, find Omar's phone, see what Chucky's doing, and then they get to the store as well. And that was a nice little moment. God, yeah, everything kicks off now.
So the kill in the costume in the finale, that was the next level. He hadn't wronged Chucky at all. He was just like, I'm going to fucking stab you in the neck now. So again, it's progression to the finale from how we've seen Chucky's descent into evil. It goes from bad people to someone you were jealous of to rando. And again, that's really nicely done.
Yeah, it's we get a lot of deaths here, and that one in particular, it's so deliciously just awful. It's just a stab to the neck, but like the way he gushes all over that little girl.
Oh yeah,
it's one of those. It's like the face on the watermelon. This film really takes chances at being really dark at times. And then he doesn't even die from that. He actually manages. Mike comes into the rescue and stops the bleeding.
I think he probably would have died by the end of it, even if he hadn't been double deathed.
Yeah, he got double deathed by a drone. And then we don't know really get a scope of how many people, but it seems like a good few people get killed by Chucky in this finale.
It's implied borderline massacre, I'd agree.
Which is really a lot more than Chucky does in most of his films. Chucky, even when he's on a killing spree, is generally just killing one person at a time.
Well, there's real malevolence and almost enjoyment in the kill for Charles Lee Ray Chucky. Whereas this Chucky, it's just anger and jealousy and confusion. Even at this point, there's no vindictiveness. Maybe with the old lady, I suppose, but there's no glee in the doll, I don't think.
Yeah, during this whole finale, it does seem like at most it's like that whole subplot of Omar was significant towards this. That he is at this very moment starting to understand emotions and stuff in the sense of like jealousy and anger and stuff like that. Yeah, like he's planned this in a sense with like the razor blades on the drones and stuff, but it's a very emotional outburst.
Yeah.
And so it's very untargeted destruction.
And it was at this point that I was like, oh, that's why Andy's deaf.
Yeah, that really doesn't play into it much.
He was essentially deaf so that Omar could be a dickhead, very briefly, a nasty little sod who took advantage of a disabled kid in a fight. But more so, it was so that the doll could talk to him directly into the hearing aid and show the futility of a situation where everything is linked to your evil Alexa on legs. So he was deaf for the whole film, just for that one small thing that you kind of didn't need and you could have used a speaker for.
Chucky was talking to him just fine. It's an odd little moment where they put that in to be clever. It's not really a big thing, is it? The same way that they have all that build-up in the first act of playing a prank on Shane.
Yeah.
And it's like, do the scary face. Oh, we're going to get him so good. He does the face at Shane and Shane just falls over. And that's it. It's a weird payoff.
Yeah. It's nice that the main protagonist is disabled, but really, a plot device that you didn't really need is the reason why they're disabled? That doesn't feel quite as on the knuckle as Nika.
It's definitely not used to its full capability as Nika was. Like, Nika manages to use it to her advantage when she takes that knife to the leg.
Yes. And subsequently her disadvantage in the teleseries.
Yeah, and you don't really get that in this.
No.
As a whole, this is a great payoff to, like, the film. It's a good finale.
So, for me, this wasn't a Chucky film until the final scene. It's a Chucky film after all, because Chucky dies thrice.
Yeah, it has a weird, like, little double finale, because we get this whole chaos, and you think maybe this is the finale, but then it quite quickly ends this massacre by as soon as it had started. The massacre seems to be over. It closes in suddenly on Karen and Andy. It's very quick, but I like this finale. It's a very interesting setup. In the first film, once Chucky reveals himself, it's a fantastic finale, but there's no rising tension. It's mainly just Chucky running around the apartment trying to kill them. The tension here is that Karen is being hung, and she is actively going to die, so Andy has to confront Chucky. I think story-wise, that's a good, that is a really solid finale.
Again, it's more thriller than it is horror. And I really liked how there was genuine peril as part of the finale as well, that was different genuine peril to the original Child's Play. I liked this film a lot more than I thought I would.
Yeah, it's really good. And again, it's kind of like we keep talking about things being mentioned and not explained and stuff. I do really like the line at the end here when Chucky is about to cut open Andy. He mirrors the line from before that we're going to have to open you up and see what we're working with.
Oh, the Gabe line.
That does give Chucky a really good motive that, he can't comprehend that he's broken.
Yeah.
After being so mad at everyone around Andy, it's not that, after driving everyone away from Andy, which is what he was doing, it's there has to be something wrong with Andy then. It's odd that we get his motivations right at the finale.
Yeah, that seems fair.
Yeah, and then as you were saying, we get the multiple deaths of Chucky, as per tradition.
And I do feel like they got the balance right with this remake. I generally am not particularly fond of film remakes because most of them tend to be the same song with a different vocalist rather than a new interpretation of a song. I'm keeping this fucking metaphor right till the end. And this one got the cover right. This one was Hurt by Nine Inch Nails. Sorry, this one was Hurt by Johnny Cash.
But in that metaphor, assuming you're the same as everyone else, is the remake not then infinitely better?
I am not the same as anybody else. I fucking love Nine Inch Nails. The original is much better.
Oh, the original is better. Oh, wait, where's this metaphor going? Wait, do you mean with Child's Play or the music?
No, with Child's Play. So
okay,
by Nine Inch Nails is one of my favourite songs of all time. I would have struggled to believe that there could be a good cover version of it until I heard Johnny Cash's version. Doesn't mean I don't prefer the Nine Inch Nails version. It's just that I acknowledge that the Johnny Cash version is great.
Okay.
And I think that covers how I feel about the remake of Child's Play too. I enjoyed it. I'd watch it again, and I would have liked a sequel.
I had to explain that because I feel like the common conception is that, I mean, Nine Inch Nails is one of my favourite bands, but I think their original Hurt is alright. I think the Johnny Cash version is way better.
Ugh. So does everyone else. I don't agree.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting take on that. And yeah, I mean, it's the same argument for both, really. It's even if you thought that no one's right or wrong, because it's like you might not have liked the first Child's Play and then really enjoyed this. I'm glad that both exist.
Yeah, I think it's important that you don't need to have seen the original to enjoy a remake.
Yeah.
And this definitely doesn't need you to have seen the original. There's a few nice little nods, cheeky little Easter eggs, but none of them are kind of like overly irritatingly fan wank.
They get their "this is the end" in at the end, which is oddly not said by Andy in this.
No, which again, like I say, is it's a take on it, isn't it? It's nicely done, but if you don't spot it, it doesn't ruin your enjoyment.
It's different, and I guess we got the best possible outcome because it was not a death knell to Mancini's franchise. He still got to keep going.
And that's the reality, isn't it? I didn't want this. Regardless of how much I ended up actually enjoying it, I didn't want this. I would have wanted an 8th Mancini universe Child's Play film. So I would happily have them run concurrently alongside each other. There were 2 Spider-Man cartoons at the same time at one point, and I have no problem with that. And I wouldn't have had a problem with that at the time. I see no reason for this Child's Play to not continue. It's made money, and it's a above average slasher sci-fi horror stalker thriller film. Wait, what?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it would work because the original franchise hasn't used Child's Play, the name, in ages, so
True.
Effectively, what we're dealing with is the Child's Play franchise and the Chucky franchise. They are now 2 different things, I guess.
Maybe, yeah.
Even though the Chucky franchise started with Child's Play.
What I don't want is a crossover. I don't want it to be in the same world.
Yeah, I think it would be easy enough to shove the Child's Play remake into the Chucky world, but I don't know what it would really accomplish. I mean, it's not like Freddy versus Jason. I mean, this Chucky isn't really a personality so much.
No.
I don't know how it would react with Chucky Charles Lee Ray anyway.
It would lose in a fight to Charles Lee Ray.
Oh yeah, Charles Lee Ray is definitely more durable. I wonder if it was a reaction to this film. We never have really explored what goes on inside Chucky. In the first film, it was that he was becoming more human. And then they sort of really downplayed that ticking clock for Chucky. And he could just be in the doll for whenever. And when he got shot and injured, he bled, but it never really specified too much about what's going on. You can break him apart and he's just a doll for the most part, isn't he?
Mm.
The closest you get is, technically, in Bride of Chucky, he possesses the movie version of Chucky. So he does have animatronics inside him in that version.
Oh, yes. Good point. Huh. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. It all got a bit fucking meta, didn't it? Whereas this wasn't meta in any way. It was done straight, which I liked. I think it needed to, but certainly at least for the first one. I don't think that this Child's Play would benefit from meta like Child's Play and Chucky, the original Mancini version, did.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Is it meta that he was almost called Han Solo?
Oh, wait, because Mark Hamill was in Star Wars.
I wasn't even making that reference, but yeah, I guess so. That wasn't even what I was intending for. I meant, is it is meta the right word that he just sort of plucked Chucky out of nowhere as a name? Because he isn't Charles. It's just a name that he seemed to randomly pick.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I guess I associate the name Chucky, even though I know it's not Charles Lee Ray, I associate the name Chucky so much with Child's Play, I hadn't even clocked that was actually underexplained.
But yeah, I somehow did not even pick up on the fact that he said Han Solo, and that was Star Wars.
I think that was clearly deliberate. It would have been much more hokey and not worked as well if it had been Luke Skywalker. That would have been too much. Oh,
yeah.
I think maybe the original script might have had Luke Skywalker and they calmed it down.
They would have done some weird Seed of Chucky bullshit where Mark Hamill was dead in this universe or something.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
I guess Britney Spears is still alive in this universe.
Yes! Britney Spears does live.
Unless she owns a bunch of Castellan products.
Well, true.
And that was it. Other looks at the other Chucky films. That was quite an exhaustive look at the 2019 Child's Play. I mean, for now, we're done with movies and TV shows and stuff with the old Chuckster. But we're going to be going into...
Chuckster? You're not cool enough to call Charles Lee Ray Chuckster, Devon.
Well, we're going to be going into even more uncharted territory.
We did like the idea of mixing it up and doing something a bit off the wall. I think we needed to cover the remake first, because that's probably the most significant obscurity within the franchise. But we've had some really interesting ideas that we want to play with because we can.
Exactly. And we'll be looking at the Innovation Comics line.
So Innovation Comics was stuff released in the early 80s, around the early films. There weren't that many of them. There were 3 short runs. Well, yeah, we've got hold of them. So we're going to have a look at them and see what we think.
Okay, so it's like the old tie-in novelizations.
Basically, yeah, but with comics.
It's sort of charted territory, because we know Child's Play 2.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see how it plays out in a slightly different way, or a different medium.
This was one that I pushed for because I've presented comic book podcasts in the past, and I'm really interested to see how Chucky does convert to comic books.
We're kind of revisiting a film, but not all of it. We're revisiting specifically the soundtrack to Bride of Chucky. And we're going to be doing that in a very special crossover with another show on the We Made This network, free of this month's issue.
So I love Free with this month's issue. It's one of my favourite podcasts. For those of you that haven't listened to it, it is a podcast format where Colin, Jackson Brown and Ian Clark come together once a month with a guest to talk about the CD off the front cover of a 90s music magazine. It's so delightfully niche and it's so much fun that I approached Colin and I was like, do you want to use your format but look at the Bride of Chucky soundtrack? And he was like, yes. So that's what we're doing. We're going through the soundtrack track by track because it's fucking iconic and we can. And we like the idea of mixing up, doing something a bit different, having a bit of an experiment while we're doing these monthly episodes.
I cannot wait for that because, as we've already said with the 9 Inch Nails references, we're quite a big fan of metal and rock music of the era. And
yeah,
Bride has just an electric score. It's amazing.
It's wonderful. Spoilers for us gushing. But you know what? I've gushed on every single fucking episode of this podcast, even Child's Play 3.
Yeah, spoilers. If it's Chucky related, we love it.
Why would you have a podcast if you didn't love the thing you're talking about?
Some of these later episodes, we're covering comics and all sorts. Like, in comics could just be written by a child, and we'd still probably enjoy them.
Yeah, we've got some lovely odd shit coming up. Let's not spoil it, but some of them are deep cuts and really obscure. And I hope you'll join us anyway, even if you think we're weirdos, because I'm going to enjoy doing these a lot, I think.
Precisely.
It's not that I don't want a new film. It's not that I don't want a new telly show. But I think while we're waiting for either of those things to happen, a monthly weirdo podcast, just to remind you that we're still here and we're still weird. I like that idea. Let's hope the listeners do, eh?
So thank you again for joining us for another monthly episode now. If you've forgotten where you can find us, you can find me over on Twitter at AbsoluteTravisT. I've got the little link tree where you can find wherever else I am. I do another podcast on this network, Forever Friday. I talk the same horror shit about the Friday the 13th franchise, and you can find that most Fridays. Mark, what are you doing?
I'm always doing something, mate. If you want me on Twitter or Instagram, it's at MarkAdamsHC. If you are interested in using me as a celebrant, because that is my actual job, you can look at my website, humanist.org.uk/MarkAdams. And other than that, I'm on lots and lots of podcasts. I will just throw their names out so that you can Google them, and you'll then see if they're something you want to watch. Right in the Childhood, Ink Stories, Life's Milestones, Aunt Nell, Shipwrecked and Comatose, and I'm regularly a guest host on Podcast 616. All of those are podcasts that you can look up. I can't be concise, and I don't think that made sense. Nice way to end the show, Mark.
Hey, it's not a bad thing that you've got so many things. You can't be concise with them.
Really?
But until then, wanna play?
You've got good at that.
Should I do an impression of... Wait, I was going to say, should I do an impression of Mark Hamill? But I don't know how to make that different.
No.
CHUCKYVISION is a podcast brought to you by the We Made This network. Follow us on Twitter at CHUCKYVISION. Follow the network on Twitter at WMT_network. Our website is WeMadeThisNetwork.com. The logo was designed by Carl Bryan, and the theme tune composed by Dark Fantasy Studios. Wanna play?
Elsewhere on We Made This. Academy Watch.
I saw West Side Story actually the other day, and I didn't really connect with it. So, some I like and some I won't. But generally, I like the idea of a musical. Disney films, the animated Disney films, tend to enjoy them.
Of course. Are you a La La Land person? Because I was definitely a La La pet.
I hate
No?
La La Land. I just could not stand it.
Wow! We can't be friends anymore. I'm just gonna hang on. How do I turn this thing off?
Yeah. I've lost a lot of friends over this opinion, but I hate it.
Garfield is the best Spider-Man, and La La Land is shit. Like what?
I just like to be controversial.
We dig music. But yeah, just missed out on my list this year. There was The Garbage Record was great, so I'd Godhead off that.
Yeah, I was surprised that didn't end up on the main.
It was
I was
close.
surprised to not see it.
Wet Leg, who have released 2 songs so far. There's another one apparently coming out
Terrible
later this
band
week.
name.
Yeah, I can't get behind it. That's what our old history teacher was called, Mr. Wetleg. It's actually Westlake, but apparently he pissed himself once.
Amazing. Yeah, it's a fucking terrible band name, but they're
It's
great.
like if Wet Leg toured with pissed jeans. Can you imagine?
Right in the childhood.
When I was younger, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man looks way older than I was as a kid.
He looks older than you do now.
Way older than I am, yeah. And that was a constant thing in the cartoons as well. Like in the cartoons, like the 90s one, he looked older. And that was the cartoon I watched when I was younger, was the 90s one. And we would have done that for this show. But as soon as Disney Plus came out, I binge watched it all, and then I encouraged you to watch it.
Yeah, and I've watched it as well.
And then we started the podcast.
And we were like, oh shit, we should have saved
that
it.
That should have been it. And then there was another one with Neil Patrick Harrison, which I probably did.
What, as in Doogie Howser MD?
Yeah, and
Ooh, I'm going to put that on my list.
A Doogie Howser.
Doogie Howser MD.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.